I always hated weddings, but my brother's was in a league of its own. My parents went all out, valet parking, a string quartet, a champagne wall that cost more than my first car. The guest list was swollen to 250, packed with people who didn't know us beyond the holiday cards we mailed out each December. The place looked like something off a glossy magazine cover, all golden light and expensive laughter. But as I stood in the corner, holding a drink I didn't want, I felt like a stranger in my own family. I should have expected what came next. I should have known this day wasn't about celebration for me. It was about humiliation. I was cornered by my parents just as the first round of toasts died down. My father's jaw was set, his voice cold and formal as he told me to hand over the deed to my house, the house I'd worked for, sweated for, the only thing in my life that was truly mine. Your brother deserves it more, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. My mother, her hands ice cold on my arm, leaned in and whispered, "Stop being a selfish son. You never deserved your success anyway. Give your brother what's rightfully his." Her words cut deeper than any slap. I stared at her, willing her to laugh, to say it was some kind of sick joke. But her eyes were hard, glittering with something I'd never seen before: contempt. I looked around, but no one seemed to notice what was happening. The party went on, the music swelling, the photographer snapping pictures of perfect, happy faces. I should have laughed it off. I should have let it go. But I couldn't. All I felt was a rising sense of betrayal, as if the ground was falling out beneath me. For years, I'd done everything right. I stayed out of trouble, put my head down, and built a life that was finally my own. Now, with a few careless words, my family was demanding I give it all away. For a moment, I considered doing it. Just to keep the peace. Just to prove I was the good son they always accused me of not being. But something inside me snapped. I stood my ground, voice shaking as I told them no. I wouldn't sign anything. I wouldn't give up my house, my life, just to make them proud. My mother's face twisted with fury. My father turned away in disgust. The conversation was over, but I knew the war had just begun. I spent the rest of the night on autopilot, drifting from conversation to conversation, pretending to care about the cake and the flowers. But every smile felt fake, every hug a little too tight. The truth was, I'd never felt more alone than I did surrounded by 250 people who were supposed to be my family. I left the party that night with my dignity intact, but a new, bitter resolve taking root in my chest. If they wanted to fight, I was done playing nice. It was always this way with my brother. He wore favoritism like a tailored suit. Even now, with his arm around his new bride and the crowd hanging on his every word, he still glanced over at me with that smug, knowing grin. The family's golden child. My parents' pride and joy. I watched his old neighbors, distant cousins, and even my childhood friends lined up to congratulate him, everyone tripping over themselves to praise his charm, his ambition, his big heart. No one mentioned that every room he entered seemed to shrink around him, like he sucked all the air out just by smiling. As the evening dragged on, I tried to disappear. I lingered near the exit, considering an Irish goodbye, but the universe, or maybe just my luck, had other plans. My brother found me. I knew from his walk, the way he straightened his jacket and squared his shoulders, that something was coming. The people nearby hushed, sensing drama. He stepped in close, voice loud enough to draw attention. "Why do you always have to ruin everything?" he said, words sharp as glass. "You know Mom and Dad are right. You don't deserve that house. You never did." Before I could react, he slapped me. Hard. The sound cracked through the air like a whip, silencing the chatter and drawing every eye to us. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. My cheeks stung, my ears rang, and all I could hear was my own pulse. Then came the laughter, soft at first, then rolling through the room like a wave. It wasn't just my brother's friends. It was people I'd known for years, people who should have cared. Even my parents smiled, proud as if he'd done something brave. My humiliation was total. I looked out at the crowd, searching for a single sympathetic face, but found only amusement. I wanted to scream, to hit back, to run. Instead, I stood frozen, swallowing my pride and every bitter word I wanted to spit. In that moment, something inside me changed. Rage and shame mixed in my blood, hotter and more dangerous than anything I'd ever felt. I'd always tried to rise above, to be the better man. But tonight, I stopped caring about their rules. I began to think about revenge. Maybe it was the way everyone laughed. Maybe it was the way my brother smirked, satisfied, like he'd finally won. But I decided I'd never let them see me broken again. As the crowd went back to their champagne and their endless toasts, I made a silent promise. I would take back the power they tried to strip from me, and I would do it on my own terms. I wouldn't just make them regret this night. I would make them remember it. The laughter should have faded by now, but it only seemed to echo louder in my mind. Even as the music picked back up and people returned to their plates, the humiliation stuck to me like sweat. I kept replaying that moment, my brother's palm across my face, the snap of heads turning, the way even my mother bit back a smile. It wasn't just family betrayal anymore. It was a public spectacle, and I was the joke. For the rest of the night, every glance felt sharper, every whisper suspicious. A few people came over to clap my brother on the back, congratulating him for finally putting me in my place. The friends I thought I had here averted their eyes. Strangers sneered as if I'd committed some terrible crime by refusing to hand over my own house. I stood among them, red-cheeked and burning, but no one offered a kind word, not even a sympathetic look. That's when the real betrayal set in. It wasn't just my parents or my brother anymore. It was everyone. The community that had watched me grow up, the neighbors who cheered at my graduation, the teachers who once praised me for being polite and diligent, all chose sides, and it wasn't mine. I realized how alone I really was, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to have no one left to turn to. The wedding crowd roared with laughter at every one of my brother's jokes, even the mean ones aimed directly at me. I heard someone call out, "Careful, or he'll cry," and the room erupted. My brother's new wife didn't even try to hide her amusement. My father pulled me aside briefly, his tone mocking. "Don't embarrass us. Learn your place, or you'll lose more than a house." That threat, delivered in a cold whisper, made something in me harden. If this was how they wanted it, I'd play the part for now. I could feel the beginnings of a plan forming, coiling in my gut like a snake. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about making sure they never forgot what they'd done to me. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to play the obedient outcast. Inside, though, I was anything but calm. I was burning. As the party stretched into the night and my family celebrated as if nothing had happened, I made myself invisible. I watched. I listened. I took notes on who laughed, who looked away, who encouraged my brother's cruelty. Every detail mattered, because when the time came, I'd make sure everyone who joined in my humiliation would remember their part in it. When the last toast was made and the dance floor cleared, I walked out into the chilly night with a single, cold vow echoing in my head. I will not be the punchline to their joke. They started this war, but I would finish it. The rest of the wedding rolled on like a scene from a play. Everyone smiling, dancing, toasting my brother and his new wife, acting like the slap never happened. My absence barely registered. They didn't ask where I'd gone, didn't seem to care. It was as if I had been erased from the script, a footnote in their perfect little story. Walking away from that night wasn't just a choice, it was a statement. I left the venue with no goodbyes, no explanations. The cold air hit my face as I slipped through the parking lot, feeling the weight of their indifference settle deep into my bones. No one noticed. No one would notice. It was a slap of invisibility, just like their empty smiles had been. But the silence wasn't empty to me. It was electric. The quiet wrapped around me like armor, a sharp contrast to the noise of the party I'd escaped. I wasn't drowning in shame anymore. I was sharpening my focus. I replayed every insult, every sneer, every sneaky glance that had made me feel small. And in their place grew a plan, quiet and cold, but deadly precise. I started by reviewing the family's finances, the mansion, the properties, the hidden trusts. It was all there in public records and the whisper of well-placed contacts I still had. My parents' empire was built on appearances and carefully hidden debts, and the more I dug, the more cracks I found. My brother's charm was just a mask covering up the rot beneath. The decision to fight wasn't impulsive anymore. It was calculated. I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to take them down from the inside out. Every slight, every word that crushed me at the wedding became fuel. Their arrogance, their cruelty, they would pay for it. I spent days drafting emails, meeting quietly with a lawyer friend, and gathering documents. I didn't want an all-out war. I wanted a surgical strike. I wanted to expose the truth in a way they couldn't deny, couldn't ignore. And then came Judge Chun. The name had floated through the legal circles I'd cautiously stepped into, a respected figure known for fairness, but with a reputation for toughness. What I didn't expect was how much he would become the key to unlocking everything. The unexpected ally I needed to bring my family's fortress crashing down. As the days passed, I felt something new: control. For the first time in years, I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the author. Meeting Judge Chen wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do. Not in a million years. I'd heard his name tossed around with respect and a hint of fear in legal circles. A man known for cutting through lies and getting to the truth, no matter how messy or painful. When I finally sat across from him in his office, I was nervous, unsure if he'd even hear me out. But from the moment I laid down the papers, proof of my family's manipulation, financial misconduct, and the cruelty that had been masked behind closed doors, something shifted. Judge Chin didn't just listen. He leaned in. He asked questions that showed he understood not just the law, but the weight of betrayal. I saw in his eyes a spark of recognition, as if he'd witnessed stories like mine before, stories where the supposed golden child wasn't so golden after all. When I told him about the wedding, the slap, the laughter, and my parents' demand for my house, he didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded, quietly acknowledging the pain behind the legal battle. What surprised me most was when Judge Chun agreed to support me publicly. He arranged a formal hearing and made it clear that this wasn't just about property or money. It was about justice. The judge's decision to take a stand on my behalf gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The hope that maybe I could reclaim what was rightfully mine and expose the lies that had been festering in my family for years. With his backing, I filed the lawsuit. The news spread fast, not through gossip, but through official channels. Suddenly, the family I'd known was on trial in more ways than one. Their secrets and their cruelty were laid bare under the harsh light of scrutiny, and I felt the weight of their judgment turning from me to them. For the first time, I wasn't just the ignored, humiliated son. I was the one fighting back with something real. With the law, with truth, with a powerful ally who refused to let my family's arrogance go unchecked. As the hearing date drew closer, I realized this was no longer just revenge. This was redemption. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm rolling in. The courtroom was packed with faces familiar and foreign: lawyers, reporters, and a crowd that felt as large as the wedding party that had laughed at me weeks before. But this time, the spotlight was mine. The roles had reversed. Judge Chun took the bench with a gravity that silenced the room. As he spoke, his voice steady and commanding, he laid out the evidence, the financial documents, the testimonies, and most damningly, the cold, calculated cruelty my family had inflicted not just on me, but on their own reputation. The truth hit the courtroom like a hammer. The house of cards they'd built began to crumble. My parents sat stiffly, their faces drained of color. My brother, the once cocky golden child, looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. No longer the center of admiration, but the center of disgrace. The whispers started almost immediately, swelling into murmurs that echoed louder than any laughter I'd heard at the wedding. Judge Chin didn't mince words. He pointed to the evidence and called out the lies and manipulation that had been hidden behind false smiles and social appearances. The legal truth was harsh and unforgiving, stripping away every mask my family had worn for decades. I watched in silence, letting the moment wash over me. I didn't gloat or shout. I let the judge's words carry the weight. This was justice, pure and simple. When the ruling came down, it was clear: my family's demand for my mansion was baseless. Worse, their attempts to bully me into submission were exposed for all to see. The court ordered protections for me and placed constraints on their control of family assets. The courtroom erupted, some with shock, some with satisfaction. I caught a few eyes in the crowd. Faces that had once sneered at me now looked away, ashamed or stunned. As I walked out, the noise of the courtroom faded into a calm that felt almost surreal. The family that had once towered over me was broken, humbled in the very public arena where they had tried to humiliate me. The victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. The laughter that had burned me was finally replaced by silence. After the courtroom drama settled, a strange silence took over my life. My family, once so loud and demanding, seemed to shrink into the background. No more calls, no more veiled threats or cruel jabs disguised as concern. Their silence wasn't peace, it was defeat. They knew they had lost, and with that loss came a quiet I hadn't expected but deeply needed. Walking away from the mansion that had been the battleground felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every corner held memories, good and bad. But now, those walls no longer held power over me. I was free, not just from the house, but from their expectations, their poison, their control. I still hear whispers from the town, the gossip that never quite dies. But it no longer stings. I've earned my peace through fire and fight, and that peace is worth more than any family's approval. I don't know if they'll ever come back, or if they even want to. I don't care. I've learned that sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or vengeful, it's silence and walking away with your dignity intact. This isn't a story about winning or losing. It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to finally let go. I'm done fighting their battles, and more importantly, I'm done fighting myself.